Hi, welcome to the podcast of us, episode 2. We're titling this one "Kiss of Death." So I am host number 1, as we have clearly established previously. My name is Stephen Rose. You may know me as Seductro. I am a big rabid Last of Us fan of the games. I beat them a million times. I mean, I've talked about this. I play on the hardest difficulty with no reticle for fun, and I beat a clicker to death with my bare hands in the first game, multiple times on the hardest difficulty, which takes hours. It's really stupid. Don't bother doing it. That's who I am. We have host number 2. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I'm Tanner Cherry. Welcome to the podcast of us. This is our second review episode of the second episode of the series, critically acclaimed HBO series, The Last of Us. We're titling this Kiss of Death. I'm sure if you've seen the episode, you know why. And we've actually got, my introduction, I was scenic carpenter on the production of the show for a year, so I built a lot of the sets and got to see a lot of the background and the behind the scenes stuff. And that's what this whole podcast is about for me, is documenting and showing what I got to see and what I got to do. And we have another one from production. Mr. River.
Special guest.
From Notion Pictures.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Easton, also known as River. I work with Notion Pictures and Beam of Visuals. We do a lot of video content for the area, do a lot of visuals and video mapping for music festivals, and we have our own virtual production volume. And on Last of Us, I was a rigging grip for about 3 to 4 months of the show. So kind of got a bit of a stretch in the middle of it, and got to see kind of how they put together a lot of these sets. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but pretty mind blowing.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. To start with, like, let's just address this scene by scene. So I want to talk about. Jakarta, Indonesia. That opening scene was really, really chilling. I want to say the acting was, in all senses of the word, just fantastic. I found every part of it. The way she reacted to looking at the specimen was like, well, this is stupid. Why'd you do? You prepared this wrong or whatever. No, that's how we prepare human subjects or whatever, mm-hmm. Right? And so she's like, what? And then going and looking in on the body and that, and just all of that acting was highly carried. I'd like to know who that actress is actually, because I think carried a fabulous introductory scene and kind of following thematically the first episode, having that bit in the past, right?
Yep.
Imagining kind of like what it would be like to have the entire weight of the world's future on your shoulders. Like she seemed like in that scene, it seemed like she would have been like the first person to know the world is I'm not going to swear, but it's bad, not good, not going to be good.
Very bad. I thought it was great. I thought that scene was wonderful, but one thing did kind of irk me about it. I don't know, for some reason.
All right.
When it comes to acting, or I should say more writing, when it comes to writing, I hate bad plot devices where people do things that are like completely outside of believable, like a human would do that. And I think this episode had 2 moments like that kind of pulled me up, being like, what the hell? When she was like inspecting the ankle of patient 0 or whatever, right? One of the patients.
Yeah, you talking about when she went straight for the mouth afterwards?
She went straight for the mouth and the throat without like...
Now, let me tell you why.
Okay.
I'm going to shoot this down immediately because I did this already for somebody else. Why would she go right for the mouth? Because the first thing she asked was, what is this bite from? She said a human. So she immediately then goes to the mouth of this human to see what would be going on in their mouth.
Right, but she doesn't like inspect the teeth or whatever. She instantly goes in with the
she does just go right in there, but she also
and like deep goes deep.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's a little bit of a maybe a stretch to be that quick, but she's the best. She knows everything about cordyceps. We have to assume, this is the big boss lady you're bringing in here. So you got to think, that she knows what she's talking about. If it was to get to humans, it would spread this way or whatever, right? I don't know. Technically, if we're talking cordyceps, ants climb up trees and drop spores down. So there's lots of things we can poke holes in, but there is like a straight kind of plot. There's a through line for why she would go and look directly in the mouth after seeing a human bite.
It still seemed a little weird, but I don't know. What are your thoughts, Rick?
Well,
Yes.
What I thought about that as when you're looking at her as she's looking at the scene, she's looking down at the face, and she kind of has this like look of like slight alarm on her face, like she's seen something. But from the angle we're at, you can't see into the mouth. So
Yes.
I think she's seen there's something in the mouth. I think is what she's seen. So she's like, "Oh, I'm going to investigate what's in the mouth." And
Okay, so you're saying she goes
what
to
leads.
investigate the mouth because of the
And opens it. 'cause
prospect
the
of a
eye
bite.
Opens it, looks, and is like, what the fuck is that?
Her eye kind of looks like, huh, when she looks down at the mouth. And so I think she's kind of sees something. But
Yeah.
I mean, either way, that whole sequence, like the whole sequence is great, but that scene especially was so chilling. Like with her preparing and them being like, if you feel ill, like get away, which is also
Yeah.
like kind of really bad advice. It's like,
Yeah.
if you feel ill, we're going to lock the room
Yeah.
and you're done for, lady.
I mean, yeah, you think
Really.
so? If you feel sick, exit immediately. Oh, maybe don't. Yeah, didn't you just tell us the rule about the
Maybe
firing
just we're going to
squad?
put a gun on the table, and if you feel sick,
sort
you know
yourself
what to
out.
do.
That's so that's cruel and unusual.
Yeah.
Jeez. We
Jeez.
could shoot you, but we're gonna make you do it. You know. But that lady, I mean, while we're talking about game ending yourself, I mean, her advice there, yeah. So what do we do, right? So what do we do? And it was interesting. I want to say also they were talking. So they talked in the first episode about the the world warming up a bit and making a more cohesive environment for fungus and whatnot to develop, a warmer climate, etc. Right? Kind of like piling on the global warming sort of thing, right? And getting it grounded in reality, right? And what she speaks on is the flour and grain factory, which is where these workers were. And a flour and grain, like, what's one of the first things to go moldy when you buy it? Is bread, dog. It's bread. You know what I mean?
So I kind of want to punch in because I don't know if we talked about this in the last episode. I think it was my wife and I were talking about this after we recorded the episode. Because I saw on social media people that were like discussing the episode and stuff on social media. I missed something with the first episode, and it was apparently like the 9 different times that Joel and Ellie dodged the initial infection in the first episode. River and I were talking about this. Yeah, so in the first episode, when sorry, not Ellie, Sarah. When Sarah refuses the cookies because they're raisin and not chocolate chip, she dodges death. When Joel forgets to pick up the birthday cake, they both dodge death because when the old lady ate the biscuits, that's when she gets murked, right?
No pancakes.
No pancake batter. Right, so like over and over, and then I think there's a scene as well where Joel.
They're softballing that to us. How?
I think
wow,
when
okay.
Joel sticks his fork in whatever he's about to eat, right, and then he like about to take a bite and then doesn't. So like in the first episode, I think there's a very slight mention on the news about the grain facility, and some people picked up on that and they were like, yeah, I think they were like teasing how close they got to that initial wave. And
Well, that's
a lot of
the
respect.
kind of interesting thing. Like to me, it's like in Sixth Sense, there's the red thing anytime there's a ghost around, and before you clue into it, you're like, oh, there's something about it I don't know, and then after you're like, oh, and then later you're like, that is too obvious. And that's kind of how it felt to me. As at first I was like, oh, it's kind of sneaky, and then once I realized it was all happening, I was like, oh, you almost put too much of that in there. But I actually kind of predicted that off watching the first episode, because my brain is always like, when somebody turns or something happens, I'm always like, reverse that. What was the thing they did differently? And the only thing I could keep coming back to is that he was shoving those biscuits in her mouth. I was like, he shoved the biscuits in the old lady's mouth, and then the old lady turned. I was like, it's the biscuits.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's
Yeah,
so
I didn't pick
stupid.
up
But
on
I
it.
was like, maybe.
Yeah,
And then,
so-
and then I think it was the
that's
emergency
insightful.
awesome video. I watched one of the wrap up videos, and then they said that in it, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
That's
I have
it.
a lot of respect for that. That was very subtle, but like going back on it, it felt like one of those little Easter eggs that you missed, and it was super cool. But yeah, so in the second episode, they expand on that with the fact that that's where it started. I guess.
Yeah, in case you missed it, here's a brick, I guess, right? Hit you over the head with it.
So in the game, correct me if I'm wrong, do they ever get into like patient 0 through 5 like they just did in this episode?
Jakarta was the first place, so that's like canonically accurate. But they don't really go into. I mean, there's 1,000 million documents in that game, so there's traces of like kind of that storytelling. I think there was instances of spores traveling through food and stuff, and newspaper articles you could find and across the game and whatnot, but it was never like a cohesive sort of like this was the full vector of the spread, because of course, as we know, the show deviates from the game in the way that the cordyceps went inside of a human, well, quite fundamentally, as we'll probably discuss, do differ, right? It's not just like wear your mask and don't get airborne particles in your lungs, because that was enough to get you.
This is really tragic. I wish that one of the hosts had played the game like 40 times and maybe like picked up and read those documents so that we could talk about it.
I did read those documents. Okay, I did. It's just that there's a lot of them. Okay, I've got a platinum trophy, so I did look them all over. But it's not. I don't believe they ever completely tie the infection to any one thing. But the airborne thing is kind of the main part. And when I think that
there is a mention like of the crops, like something to do with crops from Latin America and Asia. So I think that's it probably as far as it gets. And it kind of makes sense because it's the way the game's structured. It's all about like picking up the pieces of things as you go to try piece everything together. And it's actually really smart design, because it's like you wouldn't just be told all these things. But I like that they're bringing these into the show where they're giving you a bit of a different tease each episode as to what's going on here. Yeah. And actually, supposedly that this tease was going to be potentially different originally. Because they were saying that they were going to do, and they'd shot a scene for this and everything. And I think I saw maybe the basement they were talking about in the sets, but they shot a scene where it was Tess's kind of her initial experience with it, and her husband and kid both get it, and she ends up killing her husband, but she can't kill her son, and ends up locking him in the basement. And that was the scene they were originally going to run, which I kind of theorizing that this Tess death was going to happen in the 3rd episode originally.
Yeah,
I didn't think it would happen so quick.
Yeah, because they talked about the 1st episode originally. There's actually a great official podcast which everyone should check out. That they interview Craig Mazin, and from Chernobyl, and Neil Druckmann, the game creator, and they're the 2 showrunners. And they mentioned that originally they were going to end the 1st episode with the kid coming into the QZ, and then Joel throwing the body into the fire. And that was originally how they're going to end it. And then they got a studio note from HBO, and they were like, hey, so maybe let's not end that episode with a kid dying and then another kid dying. They're like, all respect to what you're doing, but we just might not get people back for episode 2.
And that's actually what I even said on episode 1. I was like, I think they had to do a little bit more than just the apocalypse thing. Because you're like, oh, well, now all my like hope is dead, and what is just some zombie show, whatever that you kind of it's very, very like striking. But then you could just lose interest after that. So that is wise, I believe, for them to carry out extra to go an extra half an hour on that one and kind of world build a bit, so you know where we currently are. Right, it doesn't take place during the apocalypse anymore. This is This is the past of us, if that. That's what that was, and now this is the present of us.
It's amazing how much things change on the cutting room floor, right? Like after things are shot, and then you start slating in things to be reshot at the end to start altering the overall feel. Like actually, I do notice in I guess we'll probably move on to talk about this hair salon set, because this was I guess I talked about it in episode 0 about the reference photo that was using the game engine that had Tess in it. And then I was like, I don't remember this from the game. And turns out, I was like, oh, this is just like an added scene that wasn't in the game, right? I looked at that. I pulled it up here earlier, which I guess I could probably pull it up here. I'm going to go to the second panel. I should hope so. This is like the this is that reference photo, right? And it's got, you can see that Tess is obviously like Tess from the game, right? And
look at the lighting.
Ellie. Yeah.
Look at the lighting though. That is interesting. Can you scroll in a little more again on Tess and Joel there?
What, with the spotlight on?
Okay.
Well, these were like little, like they made them. It seemed like they were making them with the video game engine, like designing them there and then shipping them out, and then everything was kind of constructed and built practically around these photos and stuff. And interestingly enough, I think this photo says that it was slated for episode 3. So stuff was
you might remember this, but I feel like when we were shooting it, that it was meant to be 10 episodes.
Yeah, it was.
Like, I think that was originally it. And so what I'm theorizing now is they were originally going to be more like 55-minute episodes. And then because of that initial change of like, oh, we need to add like 30 minutes onto this, or else everyone's going to be super sad. We need to end with something of hope. I think because of that, they clipped bits out of each of the other episodes and then landed at 9. And that's why maybe we lost the opening with Tess, because originally it would have been the opening of the last episode with the 68 TV show.
Yep.
The opening of this episode with the Jakarta scene. And then the third would have been the opening with Tess. And then she would have probably died somewhere in the middle of the episode rather than near the end.
Yeah, one thing that hit me really crazy was like how many of the sets that we worked on were in just this episode alone. Like slugged through so many of what I figured was some of the big ones. Like, I mean, the Bostonian and the State House, and I mean, there was the sunken hotel lobby.
Shout out my city, Edmonton. You know,
why? What's
is there like
the
a
street
freaking
scene,
right? With
there's one street
you can
scene
see downtown.
Yep,
you can see my roommate's workplace in it.
Yeah, and then of course the 4th Avenue flyover here in Calgary was used for that was a long shot where they were walking on that overpass bridge kind of thing.
Yeah, well, we should talk a bit about that when we get to that part of the episode. Yeah, that was, if you live here, that was impressive. Yeah, to see what they did. Like it's like, oh, whatever, they just built it on a set. They shot that actually on location, and they shut a whole main thoroughway into the city down for like 2 weeks.
Oh, I think it was only the weekend.
Crazy.
They only
was it only the weekend?
Yeah, they only shut down for the weekend.
Oh, okay, maybe it was a partial, because I remember they were prepping earlier, so it might have been like a partial shutdown. But it was a while.
They probably shut it down to 1 lane, and then it was. I
think that's probably what happened, because they I remember they were still having people travel on it, but then they were like building on the one side. So
yeah. We'll get to talking about that. I actually have no photos of that because that wasn't something that I worked on.
I want to do a quick side note here. I want to address. So obviously Neil Druckmann, creator of The Last of Us. That's all fair and well. But I do want to address it because I initially had said I wasn't sure. I know that there's like 3 main gaming or head directors of games at Naughty Dog at the time. And it was Amy Hennig, it would be Bruce Straley, and it was Neil Druckmann, right? And Bruce Straley and Neil Druckmann were co-directors of The Last of Us, the game, and in all of the credits to the show and whatever, you don't see his name mentioned once. It just says like director of the game, and then just puts Neil Druckmann. And I thought that was kind of like an offside snub, which I thought was kind of strange because it is Neil Druckmann's baby now. The second one was like entirely directed by him, and Amy Hennig was on the Uncharted project. I looked that up and cleared that up, but so like I don't know I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. It just feels. I actually had a friend of mine just Google it for me while we were sort of watching the episode, and one of the first things you're reading was, she was reading was just that Bruce Straley was calling for unionization of the game industry just for proper recognition in credits and stuff. So, so obviously he's not too happy about that. So I think that's kind of lame, and I think we should shout that guy out as well because it's groundbreaking game, and I think that. If you co-directed it, if two people worked on it, you should at least, get your name in there, right? Imagine if two people wrote Game of Thrones, the book, and then one guy just said, I did it.
Yeah.
I wonder what exactly that is. Television crediting is really strange because they pare the credits down a ton. Like for how many people actually worked on the show, they didn't really have a lot of their names credited. Like in my department, it was like the rigging key grip, the rigging best boy, which is like the second in command, and then the rigging leads, and there was 3 leads, and then the rigging grips. There was probably like, I don't know, 20 of us, maybe more than that. Nobody under the leads is credited.
Right. It's the same.
So
with,
that's one thing.
It's the same with construction, right? There was, the Last of Us employed like 1,400 people in Alberta. And man, you look at the credits, when it comes to the people in Alberta, like the people, especially in construction or painting or like, set building, it's just like, the construction lead, like coordinator gets a credit.
If they didn't take an aside of like apart from all of the initial credits of like, TV, like the showrunners and all that stuff, like if they didn't take this momentary aside that just says based on the video game, created by blah, blah, blah. That's a pretty simple and easy moment to add.
That might be a technicality, right? Because I wonder if he was the co-director of the game, but then Druckmann was just considered the creator. Because usually the creator is the person that originally wrote it and conceptualized it. Mm-hmm. And then someone can come in and direct too, but they're not necessarily the writer. And that'll be the same kind of thing in... there's weird things like that with feature films too, where if you the people that are up for the Oscar for Best Picture are the producers and not necessarily the director. From what I know, he didn't win one for a long time.
There was like a bit of a fallout between the two of them, so they were like it was their project together, basically, right? They started the whole thing off the back of like Uncharted was such a smash hit, and they wanted to kind of split the entire Naughty Dog team up into two, and Amy Hennig kind of was like heading up the Uncharted side, if I remember correctly, and then those two decided to go off and make their own game. So they were all basically like the heads of the company. So they had like a fallout, and that's why Last of Us 2 has no Bruce Straley in it at all. He left the company. He quit the company before. So it is possible, maybe just due to the nature that we're probably, based on what I'm seeing, we're gonna see some of the second one in one of these seasons, obviously, I guess, right? So because if they're talking about casting for it already, so I'm gonna assume that's happening. Yep. And in that instance, then you could say that he wasn't a part of that. So if on technicalities, perhaps he could dodge that, but it still just seems like it was done in ill faith. You could have just put his damn name up there, but whatever. That's an aside. I respect
even the special thanks. Yeah,
exactly. Just something. Throw a dog a bone, dude. Come on. Yeah.
All right. Do we want
I don't know what he's up to right now, but hope you're doing good, bud.
Do we want to move on to this? Your notes from the scene here with Ellie waking up.
Yes. I thought I had good insight here, but we do have the cinematographer here, lighting guy expertise here with River there. So we have the opening shot with Ellie there. It's the following the Jakarta in the intro. To take it away, what do you see?
What do I see? Or River?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I thought it was super striking right off the bat, the contrast, right? Like they had this beautiful beaming light coming down, like it really. Symbolically, like we typically think of that as like the beam of light from God, or something like that. And so
God rays.
God rays. It definitely seemed like it was shining down on her, like some higher power shining down on her. Was one thing I definitely came to my mind. But then the other thing that was really interesting is like you see her and she wakes up, and then there's the butterfly and all that, and then she sees Joel and Tess and is like, oh, startled, and then they're sitting in
right
the
here.
shadows, right?
Yeah, then they're in a darkened scene.
Yeah, exactly. And so that made me think, if you're lost in the darkness, look to the light. And here's Ellie sitting in this beam of light.
Yeah, and she so even like dig a little deeper into that. She's surrounded by moss and lichen, which is a specific type of plant. I can't remember if it's I can't remember what the heck it is exactly, but it's a fancy plant. I think it's a fungus as well. Yeah. So I don't actually remember, but I was told something and I didn't write it down. So here I am being a great host. But that, as well as the butterfly, is technically the symbol of rebirth after death, when used symbolically in cinematography.
Interesting.
Quite often. That's so the fact the butterfly flies over her, she's in the fetal position, you know, like almost like it has embryonic vibes to it, right? You know, and of course she's a child, and so like maybe like the like what did my partner said, like an egg of hope, you know, in like what seems like a pretty bleak, otherwise kind of shadowed world. And yeah, it looks over at Tess and Joel, and they're just like sitting in the darkness, looking rather disgruntled.
Yeah,
exactly,
waiting for her to twitch. She twitches, I'm killing her.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They're very suspicious, right? And it's actually quite a funny scene. Once again, gotta give credit to Bella Ramsey, and actually, I really liked Pedro Pascal's banter as well in this episode.
Dude, that one
back and forth are so funny.
Yeah, the pair of lines where she's just like, "Fuck you, I didn't ask for this," and he was like, "Yeah," it's like that makes two of us. It just felt so Joel and Bella and
she says,
and Ellie.
When they go to pee or whatever, she's like, I need to pee, and she goes to leave to the other room, and then she says, "There's nothing bad in here," and he just goes, "Only you."
Yeah, I can see it in the subtext, like the subtitles on the screen, like playing the game. It's so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that.
I was gonna say it's interesting because there's a lot of parallel there too with the game and with the dialogue. And that comes up even more so later on in the episode, where it's like shot for shot, word for word, straight out of the script, which is interesting because so far, and it'll be interesting to see going forward, but so far, both of the first two episodes were written by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. So cool. It's really infused with that. Like anybody that was worried that the show would stray from the source material too much, like Neil had his hands in all of it.
Yeah, Neil did mention that he was really excited to be able to retouch and like just maybe do the first game the way that like make the revisions that he always wanted to.
It's like there was another guy there who had other ideas with him, working with him.
and
just kidding.
The interesting thing I found that was funny about it was I have a friend of mine that's through the production, and you'll learn more about it later on why, but through the production became quite close with Craig and Neil, and he said that Craig was constantly in deference to Neil, and it's like, here's Craig, just made Chernobyl, won a bunch of Emmys, like everybody's like, holy smokes, this guy's the best, and he's going to Neil like, is this how you want to do it, Neil? Is this the best way to go? Like, should we do it this way? Should we do it a different way? Like, what do you think? And
he's
which was
fanboying.
really interesting. Yeah, totally. And
either fanboy or like the scared of video gamers, because we're a rabid
both
people.
Well, he was a huge fan of the game series, right? And it kind of like in the first podcast they talk about how it all came about, but basically originally it had been optioned for a movie, and they were trying to make it into a movie, which was just nuts. Like, imagine trying to do all of that in one movie.
Get a Resident Evil movie out of that.
Exactly. And Neil didn't think it was going to work either, and then they couldn't make it, they couldn't crack the story, so the rights went back to him, and then he'd seen Chernobyl, and somehow the word had gotten back and forth between them, and both of them were like, oh my god, I'm a huge fan of yours. And then they got together and started talking about it, and it was just like the first meeting, like, let's just chat ideas, like, what do you think? And Craig was so passionate about it and got so excited that Neil's just like, oh man, maybe this is a thing. And then he goes, what if, if we were maybe gonna do this with HBO, like what would that take? Like what would be the thing? And he's like, oh, well, we just set up a meeting at HBO and I tell them this is my next show.
I've already done this. I can walk you through
Thanks,
that.
Craig.
Yeah.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then Craig took him in there and they had the first meeting and Neil was kind of primed to pitch the show. And then Craig just pitched the whole thing. Like Neil just kind of like sat back and he was like, I thought I'd just play it cool and just sit back with my sunglasses on or whatever. And then Craig just pitched him his whole game. And he was like so impressed with how well he knew it. And then right there, HBO's like, well, Craig, we told you that the next thing you bring here, you just got to be super excited and passionate about it. And this is clearly it. So
viewers, can one of you send us a Photoshop, please, of a room with Craig and Neil Druckmann and just the whatever, the deal with the shades. Can someone just do that for me? If you're listening to this and you have those skills, just bang one of those out for me.
You know what?
Quick. I'd just like to make it my desktop background or something.
I'll probably bang that out when I edit this because I'll see this part and then I'll just be right next to my computer, perfect. So I'll do that.
Perfect. Well, that's awesome. And yeah, again, I underline it and I write it so many times. I love Ellie. I love her. She's doing so good. She's doing so good as that character because I think that there was a healthy amount of doubt, obviously, surrounding this series, considering video games and
you're rather invested.
Media that isn't. Yeah, I am right, and video games have a history of being translated really poorly, and this one seemed like a pretty easy thing to just do the damn story. You know what I mean? Just follow the lines that are drawn in the sand for you already. But there are, and actually this is probably what Tanner and I were talking about pre-show, sort of thinking like there's some deviations that they've made, like quite off the beaten path a little bit here, where I'm still wondering about like what I don't think I dislike any of these changes. I don't know, Tanner. Did you had something you were kind of like trying to hold back on before pre-show? So
yeah,
what?
Well, that's more for like I think the end. But before we go too far, I just want to ask, who did it better?
Oh yeah, please.
Who did it better, Ellie or me posing as Jeff Goldblum?
Yeah, you in this set. That's obviously the better one. Can you scroll in on that at all, or it doesn't let you?
Yeah.
Control scroll or something. There you go. Can you be more? Yes.
That's about all I got.
That's how far into the episode are we?
Host number 2.
That's what's up.
How far are we into the episode here?
Oh, we're 34 minutes.
That's fucking sick. Oh wait, if it's 35, we're screwed. But that's so cool, dude. That is so cool. Yeah, and it's funny because I remember I had to actually deduce that was a barbershop because I'm playing the show, believe it or not. I'm watching the show as if I was playing the game, which is I'm trying to take in as much environmental storytelling as possible and kind of trying to just like hone in on sneaky things they'll throw in there, because I know that that's just how the game was primarily told, right? You didn't have any like exposition dumps or anything like that. And granted, the show is very, very light on that type of stuff, and I appreciate that. I think they're maybe slightly heavy-handed in this episode with some of the stuff, but there were big changes to be made. So, I think that they kind of eased you into it. Like, so what do you guys think about the change to the fungal, let's just call it like the fungal vines, the network, the mycelial network,
mycelium
sort
network.
Of.
Okay, so I'll speak to that.
That's a new concept.
I'll speak to that. That was, I guess, they first mentioned that when Ellie was looking over the edge on their way to the Bostonian, right? And they saw the big, it was like a sea of infected that were all just kind of wallowing on the ground, like writhing.
They were like dead or something almost.
They weren't dead.
Only the ones in the light would writhe, and then everyone else wouldn't move, which is again some light symbolism that I was like looking at.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was my like number 2 lighting thing of the episode I wanted to mention was how they brought that in and that they were reacting to the light. I found that to be pretty
it was interesting, but then also they like Ellie instantly picks up on. She's like, they're all connected. And then
Yeah.
Tess starts to like explain like the standard mycelium network and how like they can communicate like fungus would. But it instantly, when they were describing that, I was just like, but they're not like hardwired. They don't have an Ethernet cable like to each other,
No.
right? I was like, aren't they like? But and then they sort of went into that later on in the episode when like the little vines came up and like went under the fingernails. And then I was like, okay, now you've got a physical hard connection, and that's what alerted the rest of them. And so the mycelium network, I guess, which, okay, now that I talk about this in post, it seems as though, almost as if, like, you know how when she pulled with the forceps out of the patient's mouth and they were still sort of moving, it's like they're a separate live entity. And like that live entity, that mycelium network that's in the ground is there that can come up and then touch and like patch into the disconnected infected entities.
Yeah.
And when it connected,
and maybe that's why they die too, right?
Yeah, right. And
Because they
when
say
it,
some
when
of
it,
them die after 2 months or whatever.
Oh, I see.
Some of them stay for 20 years because maybe they're active. They're
build the
consistently
strength
plugged
of the
in.
mycelial network.
Yeah, that was an interesting note there.
The Ethernet hub.
Yeah, that was an interesting note about the, like, when Joel says that some of them last a couple months and some of them have been infected and walking around for 20 years. I'm interested to see what that means, right? Because I guess, did they ever explain that in the game?
Well, did you hear? Yes, they did explain that in the game. They specifically mentioned that, like, when they explain what a clicker is after you run into one to Ellie, and then of course they run into. I'm not going to spoil anything just because now I know we have show viewers who are not game players, so I'm not going to spoil anything. But there was a scene where they're being asked as they're crossing the bridge you guys were speaking about, I believe. She said, "Is it true that there's giant swollen ones that want to throw up, big fungal
spores.
bombs or whatever, and puke on you and this and that?" And then they're like, "No." Right? And they're like, "Are there ones that their eyes burst and they make sounds like bats and they could see in the dark?" And then they're just like, look at each other all quiet, and they're like,
yeah, was that a nod? Was that a nod to like maybe not featuring bloaters or bloaters in that way?
I doubt it. I
think that if anything, it's just suggesting that what we're going to see coming up for them is going to be different. Because I think that the idea of, because they're moving away from the spores idea, which I mean makes a lot of sense for the TV show, because I bet you that probably was in the early drafts of the script, and then they got Pedro Pascal on board and they're like, okay, so you're going to have to wear a gas mask for half the scenes.
Yep.
He's like, I'm actually contractually obligated to not put a mask on in any other show. Like, I've only got the one show
maybe that's interesting. I was saying maybe it was just like the Bane effect of where like they just didn't want to have to remaster the audio for every time that they enter a building, where there's just a muffle, right? Like,
well, and they've got these pretty actors. You kind of want to see their faces. Like,
that is fair, yeah. That is fair, yeah, 100%. So, but I thought that was interesting. They referenced basically directly what a bloater would be. So that either means one or two things. One, maybe what we'll see will be different, and that'll be kind of interesting if they start inventing new infected. I don't know how exactly I'll feel about that, but at the same time, there's like probably 5 they can pick from that we know of, But if they don't get to something like the Rat King at some point, then I'll be upset, and the Rat King would be from the second one, and that's the absolute monstrosity you encounter in the second one, which is the most horrifying of all forms of
I don't know if I actually watched you
mycelium.
play that part.
Go on YouTube, look up Rat King, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's freaking scary stuff. Yeah, and so they bombed also most of the major cities, right? You saw all the bomb marks and everything, and they just said it didn't work most places, but it did work here.
Yeah,
that's real lucky, I guess.
Must have hit Boston hard.
Yeah, right. Like, well, I mean, looking at the buildings, the structures, which was gorgeous, an absolute like feast for the eyes, especially considering TV CGI history, where it's like it's damn near there. You know what I mean? It's almost at movie level, but it never quite is. This actually just feels like it's there. You know what I mean? Because the budget obviously is astronomical.
HBO was like, we got that problem solved. We'll just throw more money at it. Like, here's all the money. Let's go.
Well, and I'm sure they've probably pulled some people too from who worked on the games and this and that, so they've got like the concepts down too. You know what I mean? Rendering like stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sure there's like some asset trading happening, especially if the director of the game and the director of the series are holding hands. I'm sure they're swapping spit too. That's all I'm saying.
All right, man, like we're gonna have a hard time talking about all the different sets in this episode.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, let's blow through the story until we just talked to kind of about the bombing. What's the first that we come across? The hotel? Is that or
the hotel?
Is that the first?
They go through the building.
Yeah,
Ellie hits the piano or sees the piano. Yeah, the hotel.
Yeah,
You're right. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the
It would have been the hotel.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
the hotel.
and
moment.
there's
Which
a
I want to
freaking-
just comment
the
before
frog.
they go into the hotel. Yeah, the frog.
I love
was the
that
cutest.
frog. I was like, who's playing that piano? There's a clicker playing a piano or something. I don't. And then look, it's a freaking frog. I was like, that's. Yeah, I know a few people who think that's the funniest thing on earth. So I definitely enjoyed that on their
Yeah.
behalf.
Well, one thing that right as they kind of got there, which is really interesting, is that was a big divergent point from the game. Oh, and what I will say too is, as far as the game goes, I've basically played the game just past this a little bit. So I started playing when I got onto the show. So I actually don't know really much further than maybe the next episode or two. When I might actually try and kind of play the game as we go here to keep fresh. Like, oh yeah, that's what's going on.
I did that as well.
And scary.
I got to a similar point, and then I actually just watched most of the rest of it on YouTube. Because man, when you're working 70 hours a week, it's like, and also brand new child, not much time to play video games.
Can't relate. Sounds like a you pro.
But yeah, I was gonna say, when they get there, there's a big divergent point of the game because they're like, do you want to take the long way or the short way? And they're like, you mean the
Short way means the dead way. Yeah.
And they're like, okay, we'll go the long way, which is different because in the game you go through it and it's nighttime too. It's not daytime. And
the
so you kind of miss out on some of the collapsed tower stuff, right?
Dude,
like, that was kind of cool.
They missed the octagon. They missed the gladiator arena, which is so when you're playing The Last of Us, there's one spot that happens prior to you entering the hotel. Because in the hotel you enter, I believe you are not with T-Dog anymore.
T-Dog?
I don't think. I could be mistaken, but if I remember the order correctly.
Well, yeah, because the hotel is actually moved to later. Like it's later in the game. Like they moved it forward in the show.
The collapsed towers were like the next place for them to go to. And the collapsed tower is the tutorial level, essentially, in my opinion, because it's the first time it leaves you as Joel with like 4 bullets, 2 clickers, 5 runners in a little room with a couple like couches and stuff to hide behind, right? And it's the part everyone got their ass beat at over and over and over, and it was it's where boys became men, you know what I mean? And that's every difficulty I went up on, I'm like, this goddamn room again, like, oh my god, here we are yet again. Now I've got no reticle, let's see what we can do here, right? And it really forces you to accept that like you play this game at the flow and pace at which it wants you to, or you just lose. You know what I mean? You can brute force through it, but you have to do it the way the game wants you to. You can sneak around, but you got to do it the way the game wants you to. You know, this isn't the Phantom Pain or anything like that. You know, you're going to be playing by the rules of this system. So I really like that, and it really. I was hoping we would get to see Joel, just nuke some clickers, which we did, but in a different way. The museum was still there, so I guess you can't complain too much because that was pretty spot on for later on. But yeah, so that was where they went to. I really like the hotels thing. Her joke about books. He's like, how do you even know what a hotel is? Like, have you heard of fucking books?
Yeah.
And he's just like, wow, okay.
Yeah, like I go to school.
Yeah, it's a really shitty school.
Yeah, it is a shitty school.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, I'm surprised they even have those in the poster.
It's kind of interesting though that they didn't, because like they're talking about clickers and she's asking about them, and they don't teach about that in school, which is really interesting because you'd think, in a survival time, hey, we should teach about the things that people will need to survive. But I think they're thinking
drop
you're
and
never
roll.
Gonna leave the QZ, and if a clicker's coming at you, you're dead. It's already in you, and you're dead.
Yeah, if we got one in here, you're so screwed. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was kind of cool. Yeah, so the hotel, they got through the hotel, climbed through. They had some little like bonding moments. Pedro Pascal's body language towards Ellie slowly. Yeah, sorry, Pedro. Stop mixing their names up here. Joel's body language towards Ellie kind of like subtly changes. There was a point on the bridge where Tess was just asking about how she broke into the zone. You know, the mall that says no one's supposed to go into it, and then you're not allowed, and it's all boarded up. And she's like, well, whatever. I don't think anything would be in there. And then Tess looks at her and says, "You got balls, sister." And then in the next scene, like Joel just watches them as they walk past him or whatever, and he just like has his gun kind of like armed like this because he's still on the hyper defensive. And his body language, he puts the gun, like slings it behind his back, and then continues following after them. So it's like a moment of watching Tess. Yeah. It's a moment because Tess actually in the very beginning actually puts herself into the light when she's talking to Ellie as well, right? Because it's like shows that she has this like glimmer of hope. And there's a few times they sort of do that with the lighting where, you know, you can see Tess as someone who has the belief that this is a real thing and there is some good to be had left in the world. And Joel consistently is like in shadow, in a lot of the episode. And so for these micro sort of emotions that they display, I thought they carried that out like really well. She really doesn't like him too. I like that. That's funny. Knife. Where'd you get it? It's like, where'd you learn to do that? The circus. Oh, okay.
They're still
it's a
volatile.
surprisingly funny show so far, for sure. And I'm really liking that dynamic back and forth between Ellie and Joel. It's definitely carries over, but the nice thing is the subtleties of the performances. Like in the game, though the graphics are quite good, especially on the rebuilds, like the PS4 and PS5 versions of the first game, it just doesn't capture that like subtle, like lip quivering kind of stuff, and that really shines through a lot in the first episode. But there's a few moments here, like later on when they're talking after they leave the museum, and he does like just a subtle look down at the watch is like just this nice little moment, and it's just a tiny little thing in the performance,
Well, because a lot of what you think of in the game, right, is and props for them to them for this is that a lot of it is like third person, like over the shoulder kind of camera stuff, and a lot of the stuff is happening in front of you, so you are witnessing it. But yeah, like you said, like the micro expressions, facial expressions, and stuff, like in cutscenes, I think they kill it, but that kill it in a good way for those who aren't up with the modern slang here. But I think they do a really good job with that. But I think that they didn't want to litter that game with cutscenes because it's more impactful in a game style scenario to be doing that yourself. You know what I mean, right? So I do like this like extra look into it. Like for example, when Ellie falls on the piano, Joel has his hand all messed up, right? Because he, hairline fracture, it'll heal. Yeah. I'm a tough guy. And it's all bloody and messed up, and they're climbing through the most yeast infection-y water I think I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, I actually have a story about that water.
Oh, okay. Well, it's okay. Hold that thought and button that one up right now. Make sure you keep that. So when she falls onto the piano and there's the skull or the corpse of that guy, Joel just kicks it in the face, so it looks the other direction, and then he reaches his hand out to help her, and she grabs it and he lifts her back up or whatever, and she walks away. And as he does that, he's like looking at his knuckles that are all bloody. And he's like thinking, "Oh my God, I just touched this infected kid."
Yeah, that's what I got out of that as well.
He whips his hand a couple times, and he like looks at the water, and he's like, "I'm not washing it with this water."
Yeah, he's still
like
very
he has
skeptical.
this look like, why did I just do that? Oh my God, I'm such an idiot.
Well, and
right?
it's also like he winces, and it feels like that's the pain. I feel like he's like wincing to the pain, but then that cues him in, like, I just touched. This kid.
I just touched her with an open wound.
You can see it in his face. He's just like, I'm a moron. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm next. Yeah. Here it was.
Yeah. In regards to that scene, that flooded hotel lobby, that was in I think stage 2 of the Calgary Film Center, and it was under construction when I started, and then I wasn't around Calgary Film Center when they shot it, but I did go in there after they were done. and everybody was talking about how like it was crazy. Like the set was there, and then surrounding it was like a barrier wall, and then this black like a when people put like a pool in the back of their pickup truck, just like a membrane that's like draped over the side and they fill it with water.
Tub?
Yeah, the ghetto hot tub.
That you rig up the carburetor or whatever the heck to the inside of the water.
So this flooded hotel lobby set was like the ghetto hot tub. It was just this massive like draped membrane over like a barrier wall all the way around, so they could just fill it with water. And they flooded it. And they shot it, and then they drained it. I think they drained it. I don't know if they let the water just sit in there for a while, because apparently that was like
extra fungal. Nice.
The real life outbreak that happened on The Last of Us was the mold that grew on that set. The real life fungus from that flooded set.
I was gonna say, yeah, asthmatics like stay home. I guess. Holy.
That was apparently a problem with that set, because I don't know if they just left the water.
As Tanner for sure knows, there were a lot of real life outbreaks on that show.
Yeah, we shot this in COVID.
Yeah.
Right. I think at one point, one of the crew told me, because I'd gotten COVID, and it was just as like a wave of people were getting it, and I was chatting with the COVID person about it, like when they found out, and then I was like, oh shoot, I hope I didn't bring it. He's like, oh, I wouldn't even worry about it. He's like, I don't know if I should say this, but 40% of the construction team is out on COVID. It's like 40%. And there was like, well over 100 construction people on that.
I feel like I remember you complaining about that, Tanner. I feel like I remember you just being like, well, we're missing like most of our crew, and we don't even know what we're doing today. I'm just standing here waiting for like 2x4s and
you know what really sucks is the fact that like, because of, I mean, if you got COVID, if you tested positive, it's like, okay, go home, you get paid 8 hours a day or whatever for as long as you need to test negative and then come back. And so
union work.
Yeah, there was people that got. I mean, one of our homies on the show, he got COVID 3 times on the production. He got paid 3 times. He got like vacation 3 times. Right? I mean, like, it's not a vacation.
That guy's standing on the side of the street and getting people to sneeze in his mouth.
Exactly, dude. Every time somebody got COVID, we were just like, should we just lick his coffee cup, because it's like paid vacation.
Yeah.
And
that reminds me.
Hold on. So
go ahead.
The one time, like I started on the show in, was it August? Yeah, I started in August or whatever, and then we got to Christmas break, and like the minute Christmas break happened, I got COVID while we were on break. So I was basically sick while we were off for Christmas, ruined Christmas. And me, my 3-week-old child, and my wife had COVID.
Oh, that's right.
And then we got back on the production, and I went all the way till July or whatever. Never got COVID
Santa
once.
like
Never
you.
got paid once. Everybody else was just like cycling through their COVID and getting like their COVID bucks. And I got it while I was off.
Bummer. Man, that made me think of one guy on the show. I won't say his name, but he was clearly quite burnt out through the show, because it's like a year-long production.
Yeah.
And at one point he ended up getting COVID, and I called him up like, "Oh, you got COVID? Are you good?" He's like, "Couldn't be better." He's like, "I am so happy I got COVID. Like, I will get a break for at least a week. Like, this is amazing.
Yep.
I don't have to deal with anything on set." He was just so excited.
Good call, not name dropping that guy for sure.
Yeah.
You guys are going to be renewed for a second season, so for sure, don't name drop that guy.
Second and third, hopefully.
Almost certainly. Based on the debuts and the numbers I've seen, that I think that House of Dragons is barely outperforming it, and that has an entire Game of Thrones.
Yo, House of the Dragon's great. You know, I've only watched a few
episodes.
It's
Very good. Yeah.
Well,
so
first episode of this was 4.7 million viewers, and they said in the first 2 days of the first episode was 10 million viewers.
Yeah. And there's
a 244% increase in the sales of the Last of Us game since the release of the first episode.
Yes.
So that's
straight to Naughty Dog.
And that's the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, right there for sure. That's probably what they planned for. So that's why that remake exists. I'm certain of it.
Oh no!
They did the part 1 for PS5 for sure.
Exactly
like, well,
right.
we're gonna do this show, so you might as well.
Yeah, I may as well get the best graphics we got. You know what I say?
Before we get too far, actually, I want to backtrack. Like, I want to try and show photos of the set construction and stuff. And I guess we were talking about the
Please.
Jakarta stuff at the beginning. So
Oh, yeah.
this was when we were building like the morgue that they
Yes.
Oh yeah.
like, and one thing that I wanted to talk about, because I've got one photo of us like half building it here, and like this one wall that you can see is taken out on the front side here. The wall comes out for cameras, right? It's like they call it a wild wall. So you build it so that wall can just like seamlessly separate for whichever direction they want the cameras to shoot, and the wall on the opposite side also seamlessly comes off and rolls away. But the cool thing is these 3 little windows. It was one of those things about like learning how to build film sets that I never thought I'd learn. And I guess this photo, after it's all dressed and everything, it kind of shows like these 3 windows where the military guy was kind of looking back at her. So these little windows, we had to build them on a vertical gimbal and a horizontal gimbal so that you could actually like grab the window pane and tilt it vertically and horizontally. And I was like, I remember just being like, this is a lot of work. Like we have to build like an aluminum frame with like welded pegs, and like we had to build the windows so that you could like gimbal these panes in whatever direction. And I was like, why are we doing this? And apparently
Why?
it's because there's shots. The cameras are going to be set up in all sorts of different angles in the room.
Reflections.
It allows you to be able to tilt the window pane in whatever direction you want to negate the reflection or to take it away.
Yeah.
And so
That's
you
totally
can't really
like a cinematography trick.
Yeah, I was really looking when in that part of the episode I was like, this is the weird immersion breaking thing for me, was that instead of paying attention to maybe what she was saying about like the bite, I was looking at the friggin' window and being like, is it tilted? Can I tell if it's tilted? You know, because
Well, now I know what I'm looking for in my third watch.
Well, yeah, and you usually can't tell with that stuff, and there'll be like all these little interesting tricks around reflections that you'll see. Like a lot of times they'll take mirrors and they'll angle them slightly. If you ever see somebody looking at a mirror and they're looking at
Themselves?
you, they're totally not looking at themselves. They're looking at through the mirror at the camera.
Yep.
And that's really often what you'll see. And a lot of times people will just like wedge a little thing behind the mirror or the window surface to get it at a slightly different angle to not get that reflection. And then also, what's the term for it? I just forgot.
Smoke.
But you'll
Smoke
actually,
and mirrors.
you'll spray something on the surface of a lot of reflective surfaces to actually dull it a little bit so you can't see the reflection,
Right.
which I bet you a lot of the surfaces in there would have been like
The
that.
tertiary reflection, the opaque kind of reflection you can only kind of see when you look into a window of yourself.
Exactly.
You know, you're looking out a window, you do see a bit of you, but most of the time you see what's out there. That's interesting. That's a cool trick.
Yeah, like almost anytime you see like a bumper come up to you with a car and it like stops near the camera, they've done that to the bumper, because otherwise the bumper's going to see like everything like
in it,
180.
yeah. Interesting.
They had to turn off ray tracing in real life. I got it.
Exactly.
That's basically it.
All right. Where are we moving on to next?
Let me see here. So I guess then like the museum scene, right? So
I
you know,
got
like
some
you said,
photos here.
long way or dead way, you know, like, and so they're, you know, he's like,
They
museum.
did the hotel. Right. So they went through the hotel first, and then and then what was the big reveal at the end of the hotel. Well, one thing first before we move on to the museum is that moment where Joel boosts Tess up, which was to be able to see the next spot, which probably for the average viewer is just like a thing, but for anybody that's played the game, you're like, oh, it's like it's
little
like
Easter
meme. You're like, hey, they did it. And they're gonna go look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
That was pretty fun. And then it left this nice moment for Joel and Ellie to kind of like figure each other out for a second. It was kind of like,
Well, and I love that. And that's the part with the knife scene too. That's a nice knife. Thanks. Where'd you learn to do that? The circus. And he's
The
like,
circus.
oh, okay, all right. She starts asking questions about him. Pass. Just showing how like hardened he is. No more questions about me at all. And I like that.
Yeah.
I like his like demeanor so far. He's a little warmer, but also like Joel's not really a likable character off the hop at all. And I think kind of a TV audience might want that. a little more so, like a little
Well,
bit
yeah,
more
I think
likable at least.
yeah, I think he's giving it a little more warmth. Like despite himself, he's like Pedro Pascal's coming across with like that warmth there.
Yeah.
And but it's guarded, it's shielded, and he doesn't want to
Yeah.
let anybody in.
He's still doing it justice, and the body language and all that still indicates, what we should expect from the dynamic at this point, and that's what I was very excited about.
Yeah, that
about
was
that actually,
this
because
part.
Pedro Pascal's like a really happy actor in so many things, right? And he can play very serious, but he seems like a pretty bubbly, pretty happy dude. So it's funny to watch him just be a really grumpy, gruff old guy.
Yeah.
And that's that. Yeah, that's the rubble
this
scene
is the,
right there. Yeah.
I think this is the walls they're sitting against here, right in front of the rubble. It's funny because this is
Yep.
like right after the wallpaper was applied and like before they distressed it and like tore it all apart, right? Like, yeah, this was just
Which is one of the most interesting things in construction and film, right? Because it's like this department where you're going to try and make everything look like it is in real life, and so you make this like perfect replica, and then everyone goes in and just wrecks
destroys it.
afterwards.
That's what Tanner was saying. It's heartbreaking.
It is, but it's also like it's wild, man. Some of the stuff people do. Like I remember working on another show just recently, and they had made this room, and it looked perfect to the production design. And then they're like, okay, now we're aging it, and they went in and they just sprayed it with all this material to like just give it this like caked in look. It was a hospital setting, and it looked like a perfect, pristine, brand new hospital. And they're like, okay, now we're gonna make it look like this hospital's 25 years old.
Yep.
And in the corner there's some dungy spots, and there's the drop down ceilings got like those those little like pool of like liquid things that you'll see on them, and it's like people going in and doing all of that stuff by hand, and it's this show is in particular unreal.
Shout out to the scenic painters, man, the absolute pivotal artists of set construction.
Yeah,
the stuff. And this show like really
on the first
blew my mind on that.
Yeah.
Because I always saw scenic painters as the guys doing the big matte paintings in the background, and this really woke me up to like how much they really do like the bricks, like
the texture and the aging and the taking something from looking like it was brand new, like purchased out of a catalog, to looking like it is real life war torn, and that was so beautiful.
Yeah, from like a like beautiful apartment to like the last place on earth you'd want to live.
Yeah,
and just by proxy of all the little things, right? Environmental storytelling again, that's very important in this series. So it's important that they get people who are good with that and obviously take pride in their work because the results are quite profound, which would then, I suppose, bring us to a revelation, which was the vines that are dead.
Oh, right.
Which
that's right before
I remember
they walk
when
into the bus line,
when I first saw Joel walk up and like tap it gently, I'm like, you are an idiot and an asshole. Why did you do that, right? And then he's like, drives a bone. I'm like, oh, frick. Okay, that makes sense. Because I was like, what is he, a moron? Like, oh, this Joel's. Well, and
it seemed like it too. Like when I first saw it, I was like, it's dead.
Yeah, like, it was definitely
even before he did it
looked
like it was dead, and so I was like, but you just know right away. Well, if you haven't played the game, even I think you know right away. This is too ominous. Like this door is just sitting open. But if you've played the game, you're like,
well, in the game they don't exist. That doesn't exist.
Well, that whole part of it, right.
That does the mycelial network thing isn't really even a thing.
They're there
in
like
the vine way.
Yeah, they're there and grown, but it's more for that. I think they just swapped the spores for the mycelial network because they're like, okay, we can't do the spores, but we got to replace that with something. And I personally think so far very interesting trade. Because in the game, like if you clear a zone, you're done. Great. That zone, like I got all the zombies done or infected or whatever. But in this, it's like, oh, you cleared a zone, but you woke up the thing and now hundreds are coming.
The element of surprise is always kind of there, right? You could always just it's like a tripwires are everywhere or whatever, right? So that could lend a lot of suspense to a viewer where, I definitely felt it. Anyone else get Stranger Things vibes when they were going up the stairs and trying to avoid stepping on things and vines?
This part here.
They're
Well,
very
actually,
Stranger Things vibes.
So I read that the I think it's the makeup designer is the same one that did work on Stranger Things, and that made Vecna for Stranger Things also was making the clickers for this.
Yeah, I can't
So
remember his
they're-
name
they're something like
offhand,
that. Yeah.
but he's he did the Night King and the White Walkers from Game of Thrones, and Vecna on Stranger Things. He's a bit of a G, and he was
Just a bit, eh?
Is it starts with a B? I can't remember his name offhand.
Barry Best, maybe?
Is it Barry? I think it might be Barry.
I don't know. I've got or Barry Gower. That's it. Barry Gower, the prosthetics designer. Yeah.
Yeah, he was incredible.
Amazing work.
When I came back from when I came back from Christmas break, that was when I got to go see like through the Bostonian and see it like after it was shot, and I had almost the same reaction as they did walking up that staircase for the first time, because I'd done a little bit of work on some of the trim on the staircase. Actually, no, not this staircase, but like you work on the set like in before everything's dressed, and then after it's dressed. Like when I was walking up the stairs here, and you get to this to the landing, right? There's this dude hanging over the railing. And all these people are
molding bodies are mounded and melted and just disheveled. It was so disgusting. What that pile of mush would have been when it was alive. Oh my God.
Right. Like all of them are just like molding and like meshing into each other and then crawling up the walls. And the horrifying part is that if you look at the door on the right, do I have a shot of that? This is the dude hanging over the railing.
I didn't even notice that was a dude. Jeez.
I know. Yeah. But there's a shot. Oh, that's the gifts shot. But there's a shot of like, all these people piled by the door. The really horrifying part was that the door is barred locked, and there's people like they were trampling each other trying to get out, and then they just all became like infected. And so my first time walking up that set of stairs and like looking at it was like my heart you're like your stomach sinks and you're like, this is actually terrifying. Because normally you see the stuff in the movies, and this was my first experience. Like it definitely, you're walking in, it's fake, but you're standing in what is to be like, it's a recreated scene of a horrific event, and you're standing on top of the bodies. And you're like, I was walking over the bodies like they were, and just like feeling a little uneasy. And then the funny part, actually, I'm going to go back here, because the thing that brought me back to earth was, I don't know who did this, but there was a tiny cordyceps like infected baby, and I don't know. I was totally waiting to see it in the thing, like if it was going to be like part of the scene, be like, oh my God, there's like a small child. It wasn't. I don't know why it was made, but somebody did this to it and put it in the gift shop. They like taped a wig to it and a syringe, and they taped the phone to its ear. So if you're the person that did this after the scene was shot,
please leave a comment.
Yeah, kudos
please leave a comment. We'd like to talk to you. You can remain anonymous. We'll let you keep your job. I just might need to hire you for some creepy projects of my own.
Yep, exactly. It's like I need 3 of these immediately.
You just scare the shit out of my roommates, please.
One thing before we move on there, I had a similar kind of experience, like seeing that, because that was one of the first sets that I'd seen was the Bostonian, which was really interesting because I just I'd started playing the game when I started working on the show, and then I got to see the Bostonian set, and it was when I was playing that part of the game, and it was shocking, the realism. And you could see the production design images up all over with creating the game engine, just like you're saying, and they were literally like looking at the game and then creating this.
Yeah,
I could tell. I remember that part.
I remember coming in first. I looked in, and because it was kind of like a closed like little set, so you'd have to go right in there, and I was a little nervous. I was like, oh, I don't know, I didn't check it out, and I kind of just took some brief looks at it. And the first time I properly went in there, they'd shut down the stage 2 and nobody was in it really, and the lights were all like mostly off. There were some work lights around, but the lights were it was totally dark in there. And I was like, and no one was around. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go check it out now. And I turn my flashlight on and I walk in there and I'm like looking around, and it's actually eerily similar to the game or to the show, because I came around the corner, and when they discover that there's the fresh body on the ground, right beside it is the guy that's like baked into the floor.
Yep.
Yeah.
The gift shop.
And I came around the corner, I was looking at everything, and was just like, wow, this is amazing. And then my light hit the guy on the floor, and I was just like, Jesus, oh, okay, that's not a real person.
Like, yeah, it would have been around
like,
that corner.
Yeah.
it was so freaky the first time. I remember just like looking, wow, this is all amazing, and there's a body there.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's very convincing.
Don't call
That
the
stuff
cops,
is
don't call the
all
cops.
really there. Like anybody that's like, they just made all that stuff with VFX, it's really there. Like it really looked like that. Like I saw some green screen for sure, but it was always the background. Like I never saw any like whole green screen environments. It'd just be like a deep background for a scene or something. And even like the on location stuff, I've already heard, and kind of just quickly pop back to that Fourth Ave flyover. I already heard a few people talking about like, oh, they must have shot that all in a studio, and that city background isn't real there, and that all is that big walking on the flyover part is all that real flyover, and all of that's really there. And if you are like live in Calgary, you look and you're like, oh, there's the bow, and there's a bunch of the buildings are the same, and then a bunch are recreated and replaced, and
yeah,
clearly
they
they don't show any Calgary Tower.
Yeah, they took out the Calgary Tower and put in that, like, it almost looks like Big Ben, like a friggin' clock tower, almost like steeple
But
building.
Bankers Halls are both there too, and
that's
it
medium
was
Ben.
like, whoa.
Medium Ben.
Yeah,
They put medium Ben there. Yeah. He's not quite as big, but he's perfectly good. Perfectly good Ben is what I call him.
Good enough, Ben.
Yeah, that's a little harsh, don't you think? But no, so they do that, and of course they're like, okay, so we see a dead body. Oh shit, what do we do? And I love the immediate, just like they both go silent. Tess and Joel just, they whatever. Right from now on, we're not quiet. We are. You can't hear my mic, but silent, and he's really, really emphasizing that. And I was like, it kind of reminded me of that movie, come on, with Jim from The Office. Come on, one of us knows this.
One of
us
knows this.
It doesn't matter. We've seen it. It's the thing
about,
where they don't talk and they all do sign language. I'm doing Naruto hand signs right now, but pretend that was ASL.
Just killing it for the audio listeners here, eh?
yeah. Well, I don't. If you okay, I mean, if you know the Naruto hand signals, I might accidentally do gang signs. So I'm not gonna do too much with my hands there. I don't want to be affiliated with anything. Anything but The Last of Us, or
A Quiet Place, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
A Quiet Place, yes. I don't want to be affiliated with anyone except these guys. Except for
guys.
maybe later on, I don't want to be affiliated with them. I don't know.
Again, for the audio listeners, he's showing his tattoo.
Yeah. I'm also flexing for no reason. I don't know. Shoot me a DM.
One thing about that, like them revealing the silence, like what a dick move, not telling Ellie what she's really like about to come up against. I get the idea for the plot of like oh, we want to really surprise the viewer with this, but also like you think they could go, okay, the one that you said the face split open and then here's like a bat, that's real, and that's what
I wonder
we're
if they just
talking
didn't
about
expect
now.
to run into one right there, but I mean,
I think
they've run
that
it.
maybe,
they went
but,
dead
like-
silent. Why would they? Runners don't hear perfectly extra or whatever. But it's before they enter that room, which is a little Easter egg for those of us who are familiar with the clickers and all that, is that it shows a final shot of just like a head on one of the upper steps. There's just a single head, and it has 3 strands of like live cordyceps still like growing out of it or whatever, or like a blossom. I don't really know the proper words for fungus. Remind me to look those up. But anyway, it's just like a blooming fungus out of the eyeballs, 2 out of the eyeballs, and then 1 out of the ear. and it was just this head, and it just was a shot for like a second, and then it cut away, and it was like, so you're like immediately, the show was like hinting, oh, this is what's coming up next, and if you're a fan of the games, whatever, you're like, I know exactly what that's gonna be.
Oh, interesting.
It got to that point, like, okay.
So for me, like the not as familiar host, if the fungus starts coming out of the eyes, is that like that means that you're going into clicker phase?
You're blind. You're going blind. Yeah.
Oh,
in fact,
Like
runners can
kind of
see.
stalker phase next, right? Because the stalkers usually it's like one of the eyes is gone, but the other one's still there.
Exactly.
Which we're introduced to a
Exactly.
stalker at the end of the episode.
Oh, correct.
So
okay.
we now have 3 of the 5 or
Yeah,
so. types.
we'll get ahead of ourselves, but yeah, we do see a stalker in this episode.
Yeah. Okay. What do we want to move on to next? Because we're
So
like an hour
okay.
and
So
15?
they got kind of get to the
Museum
top of the
scene.
stairs. They get through, the keeping silent. The museum like collapses behind them.
Right.
And I don't know that we need to speak too much to anything up until that point.
The most video gamey
Yeah.
shit. They walk
Yeah.
through a door, and right behind them. It's like, nope, you've hit a checkpoint. Keep going.
It was
I love that.
almost too. If it wasn't for the fact that this is based on a video game, I would have been like, "That's too on the nose, guys."
It was borderline.
But because it
meta.
is, I'm like, okay.
They've
Yeah,
done
that
it a
happens
few
in the
times.
game.
I
I
referenced
think
in the
it's
first
exactly what
episode.
happens in that scene.
Joel hits a wrench, hits the old lady with a wrench, and then just drops it. Like one-time use melee weapon. In the fight with the clickers in this episode, Tess hits one with an axe. Doesn't get it back.
Yep.
One-time use melee weapon. They're really just throwing little references to the gamers out there, because you get a melee weapon, you're like, I'm pretty sure this will be good for a few swings. Nope, just one.
Yeah. Come on. like Gordon Freeman was able to carry the crowbar all the way to friggin' Zen in Half-Life. Like, come
Well,
on.
unfortunately, they never found a good enough crowbar in The Last of Us to last them a whole damn
Crowbars
game,
are very
which was
solid,
mind-blowing.
though. I will say, crowbars are
That's-
very solid.
So are lead
I-
pipes.
Yeah, lead pipes
actually.
break in that game. Then later on, you get them, and they're like 3 hits or 5. or
Well,
something.
lead
I'm
is
pretty
slightly
sure.
softer than steel, so I can see it, but it's like, come on, guys, give me a few swings here.
My
Yo.
arm's gonna break before I break a lead pipe with my
I
arm.
wonder.
That's what I'm
I wonder
gonna
if
say.
like canon or if like actual if it was thought about in that way, because the first thing that I
It
thought
had to have
in episode 1 when Joel cranks that runner over the Adler lady, when he just like cranks her with the pipe wrench, and then it's like covered in blood and he drops it, I was like, oh yeah, I guess like you wouldn't want to put that in your pocket. It's a bunch of infected blood, right? So I wonder if in the game they're
and
actually making you ditch the weapon.
Also, like, because they're still just coming to terms with what's happening, and he's like, it's a murder weapon. Like So I think
that's another
that's like a part
perspective.
of it too, impulsively. Like, oh, I just killed somebody with this thing. Like,
He's not a very good
and he
murderer. You gotta
knows-
keep that. You gotta keep that. You
No.
gotta bury that.
you should, yeah, you should. But it's a common thing when someone does like kill somebody in an act of surprise and then flees the scene, is they're just going to leave everything there, and which obviously is why a lot of people end up getting caught. But yeah, I definitely really interesting, the single use melee coming around. And
It's happened twice now. I think you're being cheeky with it. I feel like eventually they're gonna get like that's gonna break. They're not gonna do that the whole series, but I think that they're throwing little nuggets for the gamers out there who are all just little crybabies, and to just kind of keep things kosher. And I like that, because that's a reference that's so silly. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't really make a ton of sense, but at the same time, you're like, yeah, all right. You know what I mean? Like that's perfect. That's funny.
Yeah.
I played Last of Us enough times to know exactly how that feels to have like the perfect. I could definitely take a clicker down with this axe, but I'm just gonna hit him once instead. Run for my life afterwards.
So River.
And, yeah, those guys are haunting. They're acting.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Speaking of
They're
which, River,
amazing.
was that your friend Sam in that episode?
well, I'm not sure if we're at liberty to say or not,
Okay.
but I believe that I know one of my friends is playing one of the clickers, and I have a feeling it's one of the ones in this scene. I'm not certain, but he's got to keep pretty tight-lipped about these things, I think. But yeah, it's pretty. Well, before we go into it, what if you're thinking of any movie that this was reminiscent of? What came to your
28 days
mind?
later.
Okay.
Oh, what, the clickers?
That's this whole scene with the clickers.
Interesting. I don't know. Where are you going with this?
Okay. It totally had me thinking raptors in the kitchen in Jurassic Park.
Interesting.
Oh,
You know what I mean? With them all like being silent and hiding in the transparent glass, and them all moving through, and them having to be quiet and trying to move around without them make any noise, and then they make noise and they come, and
it's a funny parallel,
very much
actually.
made me feel that.
Well, because they did that little echolocation type thing too. They were doing their little like the raptor as well as the there you go.
It made me think. I was like, these guys sound like raptors, which I wasn't on set for these things, but yeah.
That set is like identical almost to the museum set in the game, right? With like the glass casing, the cannons in the corner. I was like really looking at it, and I was like, I like remember being here and jumping over these things and hiding behind them and swinging around and
one of the funniest things of that friggin' set, like in regards to like the set construction portion of it, was the set designers being like, oh yeah, we really need to have like this specific style of flooring in this room. Like they were really like, we need to match or whatever what's in the game. Which actually the funny part is when I went and played the game, I was like, there's no herringbone flooring in this room. Like there was like a decision, it was like, it has to be herringbone, right? Like we have to make this herringbone floor, which the labor to manufacture it all and to install it all was insane. And when I watched that episode,
for the viewers who are uncultured, herringbone.
Well, I'm trying to find a picture here too. I'm trying to talk and also find the photo of.
Well, herring's a fish, isn't it?
Yeah, it's.
And while you're looking for that, like just thinking about the attention to detail that people are putting in. You're talking about the head on the stairs, like like you have to imagine that took someone a couple weeks just to build that that piece, and it's there for one shot, but it's so perfect. Yeah, perfect in that second.
So yeah, I'm looking at this flooring, right? This it's like a zigzag back and forth. It's almost like the tile does it a lot, but we did out of like a thin plywood, and it's cool because like the way that the grain catches it like back and forth gives it like a lighter and a dark color, even though those pieces look identical. It's just the way the light catches it. It's like a certain style of flooring, and we had to do that all through the State House in the Bostonian. And man, like I remember, like of course, again, immersion breaking, watching that scene. Watching like the clickers and everything go on, and I'm looking to see if you can see the flooring at all, and sure as shit you can't. It's too dark, and I was like, man, we spent so much time on that floor. Those are the things that are hilarious.
Even just the reflections and things coming off of it, and like, oh man, all of those things, like the wallpaper in the Bostonian, it was just like right out of the game. It was unreal. Yeah, very, very impressed with that whole set. But that scene was, I don't know, how did you guys feel? That was,
I thought it was A+.
The scene with Joel reloading is what really sold it for me, because I never even had considered at any point that, in the game you don't think about this because that's not, you couldn't make the game fun if you had reloading made everyone chase you. It would be so much less fun. But him just sitting there and like slowly, quietly emptying his bullets or whatever, and and putting one in at a time, and he's just shaking or whatever, and you can hear it like kind of or not hear it at all, and you're like, that lot of tension building. And the person who I was watching it with, has never played the game or anything, so I get like a nice, cool kind of perspective on some of that, and she was like, really, she found that to be like really intense, and of course that I did too. But I know what those things are capable of. I know it's a good couple rounds to the face and maybe an axe also to take them down. So they looked great. They looked really, really cool. I'm kind of excited to see more of them, or to see what kind of just really miserable situations you can find yourself in with those guys, to be honest.
A+ to the clickers, man. They absolutely nailed the vibe of what it's like to face one of those in the game.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the
it
running.
really-
This
it
is
really felt bad.
immediately running away as fast as you can and like
Yeah.
trying to turn and shoot. And when they first go to shoot the one running at him, they miss 4 times. I'm like, yeah, they're playing the game.
Notably,
100% what
That's it.
happens.
notably, no bricks or bottles.
Notably, no bricks or bottles yet. I know.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's gonna come like down the line here. Like I feel like you're gonna see some of those kind of dynamics come into play, because you don't necessarily want to blow your whole load right off the bat.
Yeah.
He's also got like an M16 right now. You know what I mean? Like I'm not
Yeah.
using the bricks and bottles if I've got a fully automatic
Yeah.
like rifle here. I'm
Totally.
I'm not too concerned with that. It's when I got 1 bullet, a stick, and this brick I just found that
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, let's get crafty. And Joel does do a thing where he grabs the one of the busts and he throws
Right.
it into a shelf
Yeah.
to disrupt the echolocation, and that
Right.
gives him the time to get away and reload his gun. So there is, the distraction,
Yeah.
whatever. But we have not seen the Last of Us classic brick and bash.
Yeah.
Run up and smash him with a brick and then just one shot him with a
So
hit.
this
We haven't
photo-
seen that yet.
This photo that I've got on screen, it was notable to me because like I was walking back from the coffee place at lunch or whatever through the QZ, and I walked over a real brick. And the funny thing is, when you're working on movie sets, real bricks are like, what is this doing here? Because they're all fake, like they're all styrofoam everywhere I look. But I walked over to a real brick and I was like, I wonder if this is a prop from a scene or something. So I took a picture of like the brick on the floor. Actually, I think I got.
Wow.
No,
Maybe at
that's-
some point the brick gets.
That's at the roof.
Maybe
How
it
do I
does. Maybe that's the brick that gets used later on. You might got pictures with a star right there. So
go? Yeah.
Spoilers for episode 3.
yeah, yeah.
well, no,
Brick main character.
Actually, oh yeah, I guess I got to go back to this panel. I'm curious if do we go back to another QZ? Because I
don't know.
heard
There could
rumors.
possibly be flashbacks or something.
I heard
Like,
rumors-
It seems like for how much time they're shooting there, that there's got to be more than the first
Oh,
episode.
I'll
Right.
tell you why. I'll tell you what you're gonna see. Not all of what you're gonna see, but there's a scene in this episode where Tess asks Ellie about the mall and says, "Were you alone?"
Mm-hmm.
And she's quiet, and then says, "Yes." So you are going to see the mall
Oh, right.
because
okay.
she was not alone. If you
Yeah.
didn't know that. So there's a whole kind of plot line about that. So I'm not going to spoil
Okay.
that for anyone,
Okay.
but you will for sure see the QZ at the very least the mall section again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like because of how they are laying in a little more backstory for people, I think it's possible that we might see Marlene in the QZ again before you meet back up with her in the wild.
Tommy leaving,
eh,
maybe in a flashback.
yeah, something like that. But I'll float back to the bricks really quick. I just I can't get over these bricks, man. Like they were unbelievable how good it was. I remember walking in and looking at one of the sets that it hasn't come up yet, so we won't talk about the set, but just seeing the bricks on the wall, and I was like, man, did they bring real brick in for this? Like they are spending crazy money. And I totally was convinced it was real until I saw somebody walking past with a sheet of styrofoam that had been CNC'd with the brick. And like the level of detail they went into, they'd get the sculptors to come in and they would go and individually chip every single brick on this sheet to just give it that natural feel. They carve names into them. They'd all this, and then they come in and the painters, scenic painters, would then hit it with this gray primer, which would then act as like the grout.
Yeah.
And then they would hit it the red, and they'd spray it, but then they would hand paint details.
Yeah, they would all be one
And
shade of
for,
red
like,
in the first pass.
all of it.
Yeah, and then they'd go and like
Like,
detail
all of
the
it.
color of each brick.
And that's the scenic storytelling.
painters,
And
yeah.
you know, I said this before in a previous episode that like it does draw a parallel to the video game industry where a lot of this kind of stuff does, the unwashed masses don't even notice. You know what I mean? It's these little details that like if you want to get hardcore about a show, they're giving you that access to that, right? All this little subtle backstory and little bit of like lived-inness to everything, right? And that little extra bit of attention is what I think separates this. I watched a miserable movie after I watched this episode of The Last of Us. I watched a movie called The Divide, which is it is a terrible movie, and I don't recommend anyone watch it. And shame on whoever recommended me to watch that, because the juxtaposition of this apocalyptic film that takes place in a basement and is one of the worst shot, worst edited, worst audio, VO'd, constantly re-VO'd, just garbage movie that. Whatever. But go ahead and watch that after an episode of Last of Us, and then go back and then look at the bricks, because that you're talking about bricks right now. And I remember I looked at a scene in that movie after watching the show, and I was like, I'm pretty sure the bricks there are literally just wallpaper.
Oh, yeah.
And then I squinted, and I was like, that's literally wallpaper. I can see like a thin, straight, perfect line along the four quarters of this pillar. And it's it hurt me. It physically hurt me to watch something that bad after watching something this good. You know what I mean? It's hard, tough act to follow, though, right? So but that leads us though to obviously the scene where they beat the clickers, whatever the heck, Tess pulls them aside and says to cheer up.
Yeah, one thing you were just saying when they were reloading, I noticed a really interesting detail is he makes the lightest amount of noise when they come out of the gun. And if you watch the clicker there, the clicker turns his head. It's like it's such a subtle noise, but it's there. Yeah. You hear like a clink, clink, clink.
And that's obviously what turns him to walk over.
Yeah, and then how the camera operation that just like kind of slowly comes into Joel and like locks in on Joel there, and then you can't see the clicker, and it brings you into his perspective. Because you're like, where is he? Is he's close? He's close, isn't he? He's close. And then he comes around the corner with the flashlight, and you're like...
That kind of harkens to Joel's like own listenability too, which I think they've made a couple of sort of references to, where he's just trying to like listen, because he can listen through walls in the game, basically, right? So they have some subtle nods to that, where you'll literally see him doing this kind of thing, and it's funny. It's funny to watch. Yeah, so he's really right. That moment, that's probably like Joel's hearing as well, right? Like that's literally he's super dialed in on how much noise he's making, because he knows what, like he said, it's his perspective. He knows what danger he's in right now, and he knows how risky. He's even shaking his head. He's just like, please God, don't let this be the time. You know what I mean? Yeah. And when he takes the flashlight or whatever, and he sees it run the other way, you're just like,
Well, that leads to what I think was possibly the most tense part of the whole episode for me was when he then goes to meet up with Ellie, and they're crawling around that display case.
Yep.
And he motions for her to come, and then he steps on the glass, and it's just like such a great little sequence of shots where it's like it tilts down, sees the glass that he's just stepped on, tilts back up to him, and then boom, he's coming over the display case, and then he's right on top of him, like drool dripping down at him. You're like, oh my God. And it felt so like the game, where once the clicker gets a hold of you and you're just fighting off, like hit square.
Yeah. You need the quick. He needs the quick shank ability. He needs that. He needs the quick shank ability. And he needs like 3 shanks in his storage, and then he's okay. In the game, he would get his throat ripped out instantly. You're like, what? You're within a foot of him. Sorry, you're dead.
Yeah, actually, one of my favorite lines, like after that, when they get through that scene, when like just the Joel and Ellie thing, when he's just like, be careful, like it's dangerous, like walking across the plank from the window, and what, I can't remember what she says, but
that was scary.
She's like, that was scary. This is wood. Yeah, that's
such a good line. Yeah,
this was
because he's talking and she's already on the thing. Yeah, and he's saying, I know he's looking down, right? I know it looks scary, but don't. She's already halfway across it. That was scary. Yep. This is wood.
So like this roof we built just out in the lot next to the
I see
QZ,
it. Oh my God.
Right, and the actually I think let's zoom back out. I think the next shot. Stop. Yeah, this was sheeting the roof or whatever. You can see the planks, right? They're like, or actually, no, those aren't I guess we were using ladders at that point, right? But they put the planks down once it was all dressed. Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Steven.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, that roof was. This was a set that was crazy for me because you see the scaffolding underneath, and like it's about a 5 foot, maybe a 4 foot drop off the edge of that roof.
Yeah.
But the way that it portrays in the episode is
I had the worst vertigo watching it. I was like, I couldn't cross that if you had a gun aimed at my head. I'd be like, please just kill me this way instead.
See, I was looking at it and I was like, I've walked I've walked between those two roofs while we were building them, right? And I was like, I know that the ground is right 5 feet below. It's like it would hurt, but it certainly wasn't down to the the ground level. So it's so weird because it was in the trailer. It was in the second trailer where they showed this roof and like them walking across, and I was like, oh my god, there it is. Like that's what it looks like. Like all I know of it is what it looked like here, and then I finally got to see what it looks like on the other side, being just like into an entire another universe. It's seamless. They made it seamless. Perception.
Yeah,
it's so cool.
There's some stuff coming up. Like can't really say anything about it yet, but there's some scenes coming up on rooftops where it's very similar, where you can tell. Like I'm sure in the scene you're gonna feel like you're in the middle of the city, but there it was the same thing. It was like 5 or 6 feet up to a lot of the roofs.
Yep.
And but that scene of them coming out of there and then looking out on the like her crossing and then Joel coming to look. There's some interesting things to note there. One, you can see on Tess when she sits down to do her ankle.
She's defeated. She didn't even want to do it, dude. She didn't even think it mattered anymore. And
like you can see that like her putting her foot down. I think it's almost like she's trying to distract from her other pain there, because if in that shot, if you look at her shoulder, you can see like blood spray onto her neck. That's happened there, and so I think that it's possible.
And when they climb the ladder as well, when she first just grabs it, she's like and her foot's not even in action or whatever. Yeah, and so she's like in pain already there. Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So that was because I actually forgot that in the game that's the order that it had happened in. I do know that she goes down, but that I guess that we're trying to keep this one tight here. We're gonna be running a little long,
we're
but
137.
I want to say. I want to get to the big scene because we saw a truck that was attacked. They sum it up as that one got infected and they took themselves out, whatever the heck, and the infected ones killed the other guys and the other guys killed the infected ones. Yeah, and everyone's dead now.
This is where we start deviating from the game pretty heavily, right?
Yeah, because this is in the game. This is not how we lost Tess, so to speak. But it is still sort of the act of nobility that was displayed, just in like a very different sort of fashion, right? And
really, really great in my view change here, because like I get the idea of the Fedra chasing them in the game, but it doesn't make so much sense in the way they've built this world that Fedra is going to be like chasing people deep into the like open wilderness. It's like what's the point? Like it doesn't make as much sense. Now if it was like in the game where they'd like been kind of caught killing those two guards, then it makes more sense that they'd be chasing them, but like they kind of got away with killing the guard and not anybody noticing. So it didn't make as much sense, but then I felt like both it gave a more it gave an opportunity to really show the functionality of the mycelial network, which is really great, like a really great example for that. And also the ending of that was so much more satisfying because like what happened to Tess, but you don't see it.
You don't see it.
But in the game, what happened to her, and then you see her body on the ground having been shot by the Fed Rangers. So it's like it's sad, and it's like this different kind of sad. You're like, oh, and you're like, I hope that she would have got more of them. There's like 2 of them on the ground, like
100%. What I was thinking too. I'm like the test that just carried me through these first like 18 fights with infinite ammo would have fought way harder than that, all right? Like, but you beat the whole first like part of that game without shooting a bullet. You just wait and Tess kills them all. It's great.
I kind of liked.
I kind
of liked in the game just how like when you're walking up the stairwell or whatever, like leaving Tess,
and then
you hear a gunfight. You hear the gunfight and you're like left to imagine. And you kind of hanging on that emotion until you get to the upper floor and you're able to look over the balcony.
Until you see your body, and I think that I like that as well. I think that impact actually, because it was in my imagination, sort of. I really did I had hope, And that was
Yeah.
what they like to bring you in that game, and then they like to crush it in front of you. Like they like it's kind of their MO, right? So they give you that sort of like, oh, maybe she got some of them, maybe she got all the guys or whatever the heck. But no,
Yeah.
it was
But then we
But
go
at the same time,
we go from
her
there.
symbolic gesture here actually is valuable.
Yeah, we go from there
Yeah.
on to I don't know, like I will my personal opinion watching the episode was I was just like, I remember being kind of like taking a step back and being like, damn, did they just do Tess dirty like that? Like, the number one, like, they changed from Fedra coming in and her basically like taking on a small military force and trying to take as many as she can with before she goes, right, to the kiss of death, which was like, it was
The title of the episode.
I found
here.
it. I think we
All
talked
right,
about this at the top end, right? About how like people doing things that don't feel like believable things that people would do. I don't for a second believe that Tess's character would have stood there and let an infected thing make out with her mouth. That part.
Now that
I don't know.
I hated too. I had to watch it a second time, and then I kind of realized. So that is the stalker that she's looking at. The stalker has the half distorted face or whatever, right? Is basically halfway to being blind. So it's just basically a scarier runner.
Okay.
I thought it was interesting how they all ran into the room and didn't immediately flock to her, symbolizing sort of that they probably already know she's infected or whatever, right? Meaning she's given off enough vibes that she's already infected, so they don't care, and they're looking for fresh meat or whatever the heck, right? Because they just run past her and she's watching it, and then only the stalker, a more like advanced version of the funguloid hosts, right, stops and turns and looks at her, and then once he locks eyes with her, she just like stops moving and like stops lighting the lighter for a second. And like then it just walks towards her, like they like linked or something by like looking eyes or something. They're like her fungal brain activated in some way, and she started losing control of herself. And then she like starts trying to fight to get it back. You can see her eyes like darting or whatever, trying to look away, but she's having a hard time doing that. And she just gets the lighter like lit just in time where her hands are shaking. And she just like falls out of her hands. So she had basically already lost the battle against the fungus taking over her brain. And that thing was just going in to be like, you're not infected enough just yet. And then just doing the thing, spreading it the way that the show has done it. So it does come across strange as a game player at first, right? So I did have to watch it again, but I do know what you mean, because I thought at first, I'm like, she just stood there while this thing made out with her? What on earth? Right? But upon second like review, that's when I caught sort of the subtleties in like the acting and in the acting of the stalker there too, and what with it being a more infected version of an infected, their minds are linked, whatever, right? So
Are they?
I think
Is that something that's like, how can they be? I thought that like
I don't know. I don't know.
That's interesting. Like, I think I'm curious to see if they explain that more in the game coming up here. Like, if that, or in the show, coming up here, if there is like because like I feel like the tendrils.
Do these mushrooms have Wi-Fi?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. Like, that's the Ethernet, right? It's like, but did they have Wi-Fi? So I'm curious to see.
I think maybe,
but I comment on that whole bit because it unsettled me too, but I didn't hate it. Like, when it was done, I was like, what is going on? But I could tell it was being done for this, like, to really just creep you right out. And I feel like there's a lot of ways you could justify it. For one, that shot is great. The shallow focus shot over her shoulder where you can't see any of them, and then that stalker slowly emerges into focus.
Yeah.
Like that shot was great. And
whips his head. Yeah. And you're like, oh.
Yeah. And what I think that partially symbolizes is that like Tess is losing focus. Like, and she clearly, you can see as
she
she's
does
trying to
hone
spark
in.
it.
Yeah.
Her hands are like twitching, and that's why she can't spark it properly.
Yeah.
And I feel like once he makes that connection and does the kiss of death, which is goddamn creepy.
Ew.
I feel like she finally gets like the last spark of her humanity back and is able to then light the lighter.
Literally, that is exactly the phrase I used. That was her last like spark of humanity. That was her last fucking fire. The fire inside of her. That was the last bit before she was basically completely dominated by it, right?
Okay, it's interesting.
So that's kind of my take, but I want to hear what you think, Tanner, because I know you said that you were thinking that you said they kind of didn't stick the landing the way you wanted them to. So how did it feel to you? How did it come across?
Well, okay, I mean, it's interesting hearing your guys' opinions on that scene and what I feel like I didn't pick up on the fact that she was like rapidly losing control of her body. I know that she does definitely like shake her hand. You know, like she's tremoring.
Yeah.
And she's shaking her hand.
When she was comparing Ellie and hers, she was like, look at this, Joel, this is real.
Oh, right.
And like her hand is like shaking like crazy. So she's already experiencing symptoms like tremors and whatnot.
But I feel like she's standing there and like what I got out of the scene was that she's like voraciously trying to spark this lighter. And I believed that she was staying as still as possible so as to have more attempts to strike the lighter, because if she were to book and run and cause like there would be no more, like, you know, she wouldn't be able to, if she would have run away from the fuel and the grenades, then she would then fail at achieving ignition, right? So I felt like she kind of knew that she had to stick in place and she just had to take whatever was happening. But the thing that drew me out of that was the fact that she stopped clicking the lighter, and then like it was, and then she started again. In my mind, like a more believable, like frantic, like I realize that I'm about to die, but like I just need this lighter to keep to ignite.
Yeah.
And it was when she stopped.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on? And then just like having like a semi-sexualized kiss moment with, you know, like
if she was in full control of her body at that time, I fully believe that she would do something far more complicated physically, but like less complicated, and just grab a fucking grenade and pull a pin.
Oh,
there you go.
That was kind of annoying. Like you dump these grenades, just hold one. There's been a few of these.
Don't worry about this lighter anymore. Your Zippo that's out of fluid, it's fine. Or lay on the ground and get the spark on the the liters of gasoline everywhere. You know, just like lay down and spark that. I think she was just literally like actually just losing it, and like this is like her last motions she's able to make, man. I think she's losing her fucking mind.
Yeah.
All right,
I think that there's some of that, and I think some of also like not wanting to move too much because it'll set the clickers off, or sorry, the runners off that she's there. But also I have a thought on like why that worked, where she's doing it and then she stops. As I think she's like right on the verge of becoming fully infected.
Right.
And as he comes in, people have this experience where when someone's passing away, they seem to like, and this doesn't always happen, but they'll seem to like fade off, like they're gone. And then they'll like spark back in and like come in and say something to you or like look at you in the eyes. And it's I've experienced that with passing of loved ones, and I feel like that was kind of that moment there where she's like, okay, I've lost, I'm done, this thing's coming for me. And then right at the kiss of death, it sparks her back awake, and that last bit of humanity's like, no. And that's a part of it, but also I think the biggest reason for the kiss of death sequence is to juxtapose Joel and Joel not being able to do that. Like when Joel goes to leave, you can tell there's this vibe of like, I want to kiss you, but for one, it's super dangerous.
Yeah. Like, there was that vibe. You were right. I forgot about that. It wants to embrace her, but also like he had to keep his distance immediately.
Yeah, that was actually a wonderful. That was a wonderful scene because they look each other in the eyes and there's that brief tension. I think it was translated very well, that it was like, you know, you want to kiss goodbye, but it's like the immediate can't and just turn and run. Like they just.
And she leaves him with the line, Joel, save who you can save.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Save who you can save was her last words to him.
Clearly a very important line in the game, but I think that's I think that moment was very resonant for him. And that was one of my favorite shots in the whole scene, or in the episode too, was when he's realized this is happening, and then he just grabs Ellie and just goes and just starts marching out. Like, that shot to me was just so like, like, because he's so matter of fact. He's like, okay, well, this is it, and we're just gonna go now, because there's no.
I'm excited to see where the character goes from there.
Mad about it. Yeah,
I'm excited to see if he goes, because he tends to in the game he drops off in being friendly for a while after that completely. He gets very cold after that, and it takes a while for him to warm back up. So I'm wondering if they do that in the game, or sorry. We keep doing this. I wonder if they're doing that in the show, or if it's gonna kind of just sort of continue on an upward trajectory, or if we do get to take that little roller coaster dip. But yeah, it's interesting to get a few different sort of takes on that last scene there. And then of course the explosion looked beautiful, and the screaming of all the infected burning alive. That was
great.
That was creepy. Yeah.
That was so much more. What do you call it? I felt like that was so much more rewarding for the viewer than that sequence is in the game. Like, I just felt like there was this good finality to it of like in the game, then the Fedra agents are there, and then you're like, oh, we got to run from the Fedra agents.
And there's strangle them, random ones, and
exactly. And there's like this whole other thing. And I liked that it was just it's done. It's like this explosion's happened. All the ones that maybe we're gonna get as are all burning on the stairway. And it was so clear once that had happened. You're like, okay, the episode's done now.
Yeah. I mean, okay.
The person I watched it with didn't know like anything. Was so sad that Tess died. Like, what? I was like so excited. She's for Fringe, and oh my gosh, and whatever the heck, and and it's just like, I can't believe. Yeah, at the start, she's like, I just can't wait to see what this actress does here with this role, and I'm just like. Yeah.
So after hearing your guys' opinions of the landing, I'm persuaded a little to like it more. I feel like I want to watch it again. Sometime in between.
We're gonna have to make this a question for like future episodes. Like, do the fungus have Wi-Fi? You know what I mean? Is there some sort of like vicinity connection, or you know what I mean, ad hoc, non-physical connection, just being near each other that allows them.
I feel like there must be. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they're gonna explain it, but I have this feeling that it's gonna play out that way, which. They've got the most plausible take on that of any show so far. Like, I think, what was it? The Land of the Dead, the last Romero one, where they're all in like the city state, which is really kind of bad. But there was like some elements of that where they were getting smarter and they were communicating and the guns. And it was just kind of dumb, but they played with some of these ideas. But this is the first place where I think you could effectively actually come across with like, oh no, they're communicating, and this is why they're communicating.
And it really is basically humans versus one enemy in a way, if you think of it that way, right? It's not you versus a room of zombies. It's you versus this entire species of organism that is not a plant and is in fact spawned. All fungus is born out of death. The death of other living tissue that is fungal anything or originates from, right? Is dying tissues and decaying materials. So they literally, their life cycle is our death cycle. So it's a very kind of interesting thing they're leaning into, and I hope they continue to elaborate on that and really get those concepts out.
Yeah. So one thing I guess we didn't do for episode 1, maybe we should start. What would you guys give this episode out of 10? Personal critique. I'm probably gonna give it like 7.58 because I think especially now that my
first one's a 10.
Yeah, first one's
like a 10 or like a 9.5. If 10 is perfect, then it's 9.5.
Yeah, it's a 9.5.
I think this one I'm gonna put it like 8.5.
Okay,
maybe up to 9. Right? I thought it did what it needed to do.
Yeah, I would say like 9.5, maybe 9 for the first episode, and then I mean, it's hard to say. The things that they did really right in this, it's hard to say like having played the game, but if I hadn't played the game, I feel like I would have like this would have been a knockout of the park. I think the couple differences between the game, there was like slight disappointment. Like, oh, we didn't go through the fallen towers. Oh,
you're right. I'm
it was like
5 for that.
But it was also like, oh, but there was some pretty cool stuff they did instead. So like it's when you compare it to the game, but I'd probably give it a 9, an 8.5 maybe.
Cool.
Yeah. And you're right. Yeah, like in terms of just like quality TV watching, then I would probably give it a higher score. But just based on, we are a Last of Us game and show podcast and other random stuff. We didn't talk about Scooby-Doo today, but I'll have updates for us next time.
I know you were like, should we talk about Justin Roiland? And I was like, dude, I think we got enough to talk about here.
All I'm saying is that Rick and Morty just doesn't need to happen anymore. All right, it's kind of weird to kick that guy off the show, and I know I don't. Allegations be damned. I'm just saying, fire him and then cancel the show. You can't really have both.
Dude, I'm sure you could
that's my hot take.
You could use some sort of AI program just to recreate his voice now. I mean,
oh God, no! Let's not start that dystopia. Okay, we need jobs. Okay, Troy Baker won't even have to leave his house anymore. He's just gonna be sitting there and having his voice done in every single video game. Everyone's gonna sound like Nathan Drake generated by an AI. I really don't need that.
Oh, actually, I was going to do this at the top of the show, but I got to apologize for this now. It was a massive injustice in our last episode that has not been addressed. No, it wasn't my audio. I apologize for that. But my pun game, dude, when you were talking about ants having their hives or whatever, and you were like, no, they don't have hives. It was like, oh, it's got to be like a nest or something. And I turned around and I was just like, dude, it's semantics. I totally full out missed that pun. And technically that means I should finish my drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there we go. Okay,
yeah,
and then we should also address we are sorry about the audio last time. Also, hopefully this one's a little more listenable. We punched Tanner up a little too much. The first one was he was sick, and so there's a little bit of that. And so we're hoping audio from here on out is just nice and crisp. All you Spotify listeners out there, none of you are cringing. You don't hear any mouth sounds. I think we should be, we should be clear on all that.
Yeah, that was good.
If you guys want a little more mouth sounds, we can filter some of those in for you. A little ASMR.
That's our second podcast. The ASMR of us. That's different.
Moistly.
Everyone just unsubscribed. There it was. Oh, well, it was a good run, boys. Anything else? Any clothing thoughts? You guys got any clothes you want to buy? Or
well, I guess we're at hour 57-ish now. Do we want to do predictions for the next episode, or would you just want to let it kind of
I say let it ride, because you know what? We are in the dark right now. I'll throw one out. We're going to see Bill and Frank.
Yeah, Tess mentioned that. She was like, get out.
Yeah, we're going to...
I think that's pretty obvious. They released a trailer coming up, and it showed a lot of Bill and Frank in it.
Oh, nice.
So
we don't watch those. I mean, I don't know about you, Tanner, but I'm not allowed.
I do, but I've just been... It's been a busy week.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to watch those.
About 60% of my free time with watching stuff about Last of Us for the last 2 weeks. So I've watched every recap.
Well, it was wonderful to have you on. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, we really appreciate that, honestly, and we look forward to freaking this next episode. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm still excited. And episode 2 could be called "It Still Doesn't Suck." You know, it's like it's different, but it doesn't suck.
Episode 3.
I'm very excited. Is it? Don't get me started. We're episode 2. Okay, we're episode 2 now. Episode 3, it could suck. All right, let's remain blissfully ignorant of the future.
All right. Well. All right. Geez, I guess if you watch this,
follow me at twitch.tv/seductro.
Yeah.
Follow us here.
If you watch this,
comment, subscribe.
Jesus Christ, okay, you do it.
I've interrupted him so many times in a row. This is so fun. Like, comment, subscribe, share, everything right now. Metrics is everything. The amount of shares, little comments. You can say anything. You could leave a fart emoji. We're all cool with that.
Oh yeah, we love those.
It helps pump our numbers up, and if you have any insight or anything you want to add, or you want to email us, we have our email listed, or you could leave us a comment if you have something to add to the show. We'd love to get some takes here, because obviously we want to get the inside scoop.
Yeah,
we want to get it all figured out.
So. Where can people find you, River, if they were to contact you or find your work?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at The River Always Flows, and you can find me on Facebook with Notion Pictures, and we can you can also find our Beam of Visuals page for kind of the where we're moving with the LED volume, having Calgary's first LED volume, which sorry to break it to everybody else, but they did not use any LED technology, any virtual production technology on the show, which I've heard a lot of people predicting that they did, and they didn't. Maybe season 2.
Just got to get on them.
All right. That's a prediction right there. I'll take that.
All right. Signing off. We will see you in episode 3. Till then, have a good one.
Ow.